The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
These babies were taken alive. They're being returned in caskets.
Committed to bringing remaining hostages home, the new Israeli ambassador to the U.S. breaks down the state of Israel's relations.
Now, we're enforcing the law written by Congress, right? If you're illegally here and we come across you, you're gonna get arrested.
A change in operations for ICE agents in Maryland. Our team rides along to see who they're targeting. And later, tricking taxpayers, the timely text message scammers are using to impersonate the IRS. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Gatton. Thank you for joining us. On this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. The families of the victims of the D.C. plane crash mourning the loss of their loved ones. The groups they're suing for negligence. The U.S. sees its worst flu season in over a decade. Why changes in the federal government have made it difficult to track cases. And Elon Musk Doge not slowing down the department that could face cuts next. Plus, the legal pushback happening now. But first, the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas on shaky ground. As the new Israeli ambassador to the United Nations settles into Washington, he sat down for an exclusive interview with our national correspondent Kayla Gaskins to discuss the latest return of hostages and the state of Israel-U.S. relations.
The video of Shiri Bibas clinging to her 2 young sons as Hamas kidnapped them on October 7th, 2023, becoming one of the most powerful images of the conflict. Baby Kafir was just 9 months old. On Thursday, Hamas returned what they said were their bodies, along with that of 83-year-old Oded Lifshitz, marking the first of the hostages to return to Israel in caskets.
I think it's indicative of the enemy we're dealing with. These people are monsters.
We sat down Thursday with Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Leiter.
These babies were taken alive. They're being returned in caskets. It's going to become clear in the next few days just how brutal these murders were.
Hamas claims the Bibases were killed in an Israeli airstrike, but offered no evidence this was the case. Vice President J.D. Vance reaffirming the U.S.'s commitment to bringing the remaining hostages home.
President Trump loves you. He hasn't forgotten your loved ones, and he's going to fight every single day to bring them home.
This comes as the fragile ceasefire deal teeters on precarious ground. Negotiations for the second and more difficult phase of the deal should have begun in early February. Families of hostages still in Gaza speaking at CPAC in D.C. Thursday.
There is one priority right now. Let's not sign more death certificates.
Ambassador Leiter affirming the U.S. and Israel remain on the same page.
We're feeling that any daylight that had been created between us and the last administration is being erased. We're moving into a mode of learning to tango together right now. Not yet lockstep, but very close tango.
Leiter, like many Israelis, feels the pain of this war personally. His eldest son died fighting in Gaza.
My son was the company commander of the lead company going into Gaza. And I see that as the microcosm of Israel being the lead company leading civilization against barbarism.
And that was Kayla Gaskins reporting. In D.C., the family of a passenger on board the airliner in the deadly mid-air collision over the Potomac has started the process to sue the FAA and the Army $250 million for negligence. The accident killed 67 people, including all passengers and crew on the commercial airline and 3 service members on the Black Hawk helicopter. The government now has 6 months to respond to the claims before the family can file a lawsuit. And flu cases are the highest they've been since 2009. The CDC reports at least 370,000 hospitalizations and 16,000 deaths. That's as of February 8th. Experts say this flu season is at high severity. Nearly every state is reporting at least 32% of tests are positive. Public health officials say they are flying blind without flu data, blocked by the Trump administration's withdrawal from the World Health Organization. Medicaid has emerged as a point of contention for Republicans in spending bill negotiations. The House GOP budget, which President Trump favors, proposes cutting funds to Medicaid and adding work requirements. According to health policy firm KFF, 92% of recipients work. So some members are worried about where steep cuts would come from. But President Trump promises Medicaid is safe.
Social Security won't be touched. Other than if it's fraud or something, we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
The Republican Party is united in their drive to cut Medicaid and rip health care from millions of seniors.
1 in every 5 Americans is enrolled in Medicaid. According to KFF, 69% of the program's funding comes from the federal government. New information, a U.S. appeals court has blocked the Biden administration's income-driven student loan plan known as SAFE. The lawsuit was filed by 7 Republican-led states who argued the Department of Education doesn't have the authority to cancel some borrowers' student loans. They also claimed Biden tried to use the SAVE plan as a workaround after the Supreme Court blocked his sweeping loan forgiveness plan. Scammers are targeting your money this tax season. A new text message scam is beginning to circulate with criminals impersonating the IRS, trying to trick taxpayers into sharing their personal information. And these text messages are harder to spot because they have a bit of truth in them. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris reports.
In December, the IRS said it was sending money to 1 million people who didn't get a portion of their stimulus checks during the pandemic, while scammers are using that information in these texts to try and earn your trust. Usha Ratcliffe, an accounting expert, has seen scams like this before. It's nothing new, just more sophisticated.
It looks real. It looks almost legit.
Scammers posing as the IRS, sending text messages to your phone, asking for personal information in exchange for stimulus money.
You're eligible to receive a $1,400 economic impact payment. It says, please provide your accurate personal information. We will deposit the amount into your bank account.
So why would someone fall for this? Well, in December, the IRS announced it's sending payments to over 1 million people. These texts are looking to capitalize on that promise.
The IRS is not communicating via text message or with a phone call for any kind of a stimulus payment.
Thomas Holt, a cybersecurity expert, tells us what you don't want to do if you get a message like this is click on it.
Then you're going to be known as a potential live victim, and there may be additional contacts and attempts to get you to respond to more requests for information.
So his advice would be ignore the message altogether and move on. Agencies like the IRS and even your bank generally won't reach out to you via text.
You usually do not get those direct requests around a payment or around a problem. They're usually going to contact you in some other way.
Now, if you do get a message like this, the Better Business Bureau is asking that you forward them to the email listed at the bottom of your screen. You can also report them on the Bureau's website. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Buying a house for many is already tough, with high interest rates making mortgages more expensive and low supply driving up prices. But even after you finally get the keys, there's another cost to factor in: mandatory homeowners association fees. Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team joining us now to discuss love them or hate them. Yeah. It seems homeowners, they have really strong opinions on this. What's the average rate right now?
So a report from Realtor.com, they found that a little over 40% of homes that were listed for sale had an HOA fee. The average fee for those homes was around $125 a month, which is actually up from $110 in 2023. The fees usually cover maintenance and amenities, along with costs for the upkeep in the community. Realtor.com also says that they're common in areas with condos, townhouses, and also new-built single-family homes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How much do major cities throughout the U.S. compare when it comes to these fees?
So they put up a list, and Edwards, Colorado ranked the highest, with almost 90% of homes for sale being tied to HOA fees, and those fees averaged around $525 a month. But on the other end of the spectrum, Charleston, South Carolina, they ranked the lowest, with less than 0.2% of homes having these fees. So if you don't want to pay HOAs, I would recommend moving to Charleston.
Yeah, because it can surely vary from location to location. Yeah. Emma, thank you. For more on this topic, Emma will be back to dive into the history of HOA fees and the factors driving rates up. While mortgage rates dipped slightly last week, mortgage application volume dipped 6.6%, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association. Meantime, rates dipped to 6.93% from 6.95%. Inflation fears and uncertainty over tariffs is also having an effect. Up next on the National News Desk, on the ground with ICE agents in Maryland. Our team follows along on the search for illegal migrants who committed serious crimes. And later, relationship transformation, why patients who use weight loss drugs could be more likely to shed their partner as well. The Trump administration now labeling 8 Latin American crime organizations as terrorist organizations. The declaration includes Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, among others. The White House says the groups pose a national security risk. Critics argue the designation is unnecessarily broad, potentially hindering trade with Latin America. This week, our team was able to ride along with ICE agents from the field office in Baltimore for the first time since President Trump's border policies took effect. Officials say they're stepping up enforcement under new leadership from the White House. Here's the National News Desk, Mackenzie Frost.
Before the sun comes up in Prince George's County, immigration officers are preparing for another day of enforcement.
Fentanyl and heroin, no pros with a gun. They just no pros a couple weeks ago.
That's a good idea. Drug dealer with a gun and wanted for murder, we won't prosecute that case. It's smart. Okay.
Maryland ICE Director Matthew Elliston says policies refusing to work with ICE are creating public safety risks. The first target has an open murder warrant and is known to ICE.
I mean, we're out today trying to arrest somebody that's wanted in their county for murder. And then if I do turn him over to Prince George's to face his murder charge, they won't give him back to me when he's done, which is just a wild concept. Like, this is when I miss Brooks being in there, because I could call her and she'd say, no, we'll definitely turn this guy back over to you. But, hopefully the next county executive, kind of feels the same way.
And just like that, we're on the move, pulling someone over.
Hey.
After a brief interview,
He can either give us a license and we can run him and decide if we're going to let him go, or we'll smash the window out and drag him out.
Another attempt to get information, but the man won't get out of the car.
I'm going to get him out.
Another arrest made.
ICE policy allows us in that case to smash the window and pull him out.
The man is what's called a collateral, or someone found who is in the country illegally but is not the target of the current investigation, which is a change under the current administration.
We're enforcing the law written by Congress. Okay. So if you're here unlawfully, you are subject to arrest.
But Elliston says the mission remains the same.
The worst go first.
And the stats continue to show progress.
As of yesterday, the Baltimore field office has arrested its 80th sex offender for this fiscal year.
Elliston says last fiscal year, it was 175 people were arrested, and the year before that, 152.
We're going to try to hit 200 this year. And we've also arrested almost 40 gang members so far this year. So, yeah, we're still fully in public safety, national security, except now when we come across people who maybe are not the targets of those investigations but are breaking the law by being here illegally, we're now arresting those people as well.
It's on to the next location. ICE and ATF agents go inside only to not find the target, but...
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Can we go outside? They don't leave without an arrest.
Do you have anything to say other than the fact that you're illegally here? No? Okay, where in the border did you cross?
I don't remember exactly.
Was it a long time? Like, how long have you been here?
23 years.
23 years?
This man, another collateral. Before leaving, Elliston talks to the woman who is the mom of the target.
ICE doesn't deport people, right? The immigration court decides, so it's not really up to us.
But she insists her son doesn't live there.
We'll probably clear this address. Our one concern is that we weren't able to see down here.
Since Maryland does not have a statewide policy for working with ICE, it's resulted in a patchwork of plans. Prince George's and Howard counties do not honor detainers.
I've asked the Attorney General's office of the Department of Justice to look at filing a similar lawsuit that we did with New York and Illinois against Prince George's and Howard counties also.
Do you believe that federal funding for these jurisdictions is at risk given these policies in place?
We don't really get involved in the funding, but I will say that, a county like Prince George's County that receives hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding is really putting themselves at risk. We've seen this before where the administration has pulled back funding.
All the agents meet up one by one by one. Detainees are prepared to travel to the Baltimore ICE field office, and then another man arrested in southern Maryland arrives. Right now you can see these ICE agents are getting ready to take one of their targets to the Baltimore field office. This man was arrested earlier today. He is a target of a firearms case. And you can see here that ATF agents are also here to assist in this investigation and this arrest. Earlier today, 4 other people were arrested and brought to the Baltimore field office, 2 of which were collateral arrests. And that's a different approach under this current administration, especially compared to the Biden administration.
4 of them were targets. We got a guy with an Interpol red notice. We have a guy with a prior firearms conviction, which will be taking his case to the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to prosecute him for illegally re-entering the country.
Elliston says the Trump administration is sending a much stronger immigration message. Is it different from what we've seen before in terms of enforcement?
Yeah, the handcuffs are off. Before it was you had to meet a certain criteria to be arrested. Now we're enforcing the law written by Congress, right? If you're illegally here and we come across you, you're gonna get arrested.
What do you say to critics who say, this is too much? ICE is doing too much right now. We have migrants who are part of the fabric of this community and they deserve to be here.
So if you deserve to be here, I wouldn't say you broke the law to be here, right? We have a lawful process to come into the United States, which includes asylum.
As for the people today, after they are taken back to the Baltimore field office, where are they likely going to go?
Because the state passed dignity not detention, we will no longer house them in Maryland. So we will pull them away from their families and attorneys and we'll send them elsewhere in the United States. I think so far we have bed space today for El Paso, Texas.
This enforcement action wraps up.
We still have 2 of our targets that are out. One's wanted for murder out of Prince George's County and the other one's a gang member.
The promise to continue is made.
We'll be out all week looking for these guys. We'll make sure that they get into custody.
Straight ahead here on the National News Desk, dozens rescued from flooding this week in Southwest Virginia. Brand new video of the swift water rescue team saving people and their pets' lives. Plus, a word of warning, the extraordinary efforts farmers nationwide are taking to stop the bird flu from destroying their livelihoods. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, from flood rescues in Virginia to a debate over gun laws in Maine. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start in Rhode Island, where farmers are trying to stop the bird flu from impacting their farms.
Right now I have up in the neighborhood of about 180 birds, probably about 60 or 80 chicks, and there's more coming.
None of them affected by the highly transmissible H5N1 virus, wreaking havoc on flocks across the country.
It's scary. It really is scary. I know that there's some in Connecticut, there's some in Massachusetts, and it's only a matter of time before it hits someone in Rhode Island.
But the couple say now more than ever, strict biosecurity measures on their farm have to be followed to keep their livelihood afloat.
I don't allow anybody back there because it's easily transmitted. You have bird droppings on the ground that's affected with the flu, you step on it, you come to my place and you bring the disease to my farm. and I can't allow that to happen.
The team, originally assigned to Richlands in Tazewell County, recorded more than 80 rescues, 57 residents, and 25 pets, including these 2 pups. Andy John of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management.
They have been our first team on the ground to start rescuing folks in Southwest Virginia.
John says the state established the Swiftwater Rescue Program back in 2019, allocating resources and preparation for situations just like we experienced this past weekend.
The state realized, hey, we don't have near enough Swiftwater teams across the state.
Maine's 72-hour law forces buyers to wait 3 days before taking home a gun. Nicole Palmer with the Maine Gun Safety Coalition says it's meant to offer a cooling-off period for people who might be contemplating violence or suicide.
I think we're very short-sighted in interpreting how this would actually affect people.
Laura Whitcomb, president of Gun Owners of Maine, says the law doesn't make sense for background-checked gun owners seeking to buy a second weapon, and says it's costing gun sellers business. Plus, she says the law could harm people who need immediate access to a gun for self-defense. But with an appeal now filed, the issue is headed back to court.
The deadline has been pushed off for years, but this time it's finally for real. Coming up, when you'll need a real ID for domestic flights and how to get one. If you plan on traveling this summer, double check your ID and make sure there's a star in the upper right corner. That means it's a so-called real ID that meets new federal security standards. Starting May 7th, you'll need a real ID to board both domestic and international flights. If you have a passport, you're good. If not, officials say to get going.
It's right before Memorial Day, so make sure you're taking care of it now.
To get a real ID, visit your local DMV with proof of social security number, 2 forms of address verification, and proof of citizenship. You may need to make an appointment in advance. A historic ocean liner is about to become the world's largest artificial reef. This week, the SS United States Conservancy began its journey down the Delaware River towards its new home on Florida's Gulf Coast. The massive ocean liner is making a year-long pit stop in Mobile, Alabama first, where it will be cleaned of any toxins. It then heads to its final home off the coast of Destin, Florida. Weight loss drugs like Zepbound or Wegovy may come with an unexpected side effect impacting relationships. The National News Desk, Angelo Brown explains.
Weight loss is changing. Zepbound, Wegovy, medications transforming bodies, patients going to doctors like Dr. Jen Cottle.
They also may actually decrease your appetite and thus reduce the amount of food you intake.
Some patients are shedding more than pounds, but also their partner.
You really need your spouse to be supportive of the changes that you're making, but they're not.
The New York Times talking to couples about how weight loss drugs can upend a marriage. Not surprising, a family lawyer, Jennifer Hargrave.
Maybe you had shared hobbies or activities that were surrounded, around food, or maybe a sedentary lifestyle, and now all of a sudden you're wanting to be out and active, and you've taken up bicycle riding or you're training for a marathon. I mean, those are lifestyle changes that if the other spouse is not supportive and not interested and engaged, can lead to you both going sort of separate ways.
Weight loss can create unexpected challenges for couples. Brazino law firm pointing out the physical side effects of these drugs may disrupt the activities in the bedroom. Other experts point to weight loss leading to new attention and romantic opportunities. And now all partners react positively or even support the weight loss. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Ahead in our next half hour, who's really in charge at DOJ? Plus, big questions about the legality of the agency's actions. And later, budget battle, growing pressure on lawmakers to extend Trump's 2017 tax cuts and promote his economic agenda. An economist weighs in. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
A new concept where we give 20% of the Doge savings to American citizens.
Paying back Americans with government savings, the new idea from Doge and the department next on its list. Plus, more widespread and more severe. New numbers on a slew of serious recalls in 2024. And later, a brutal winter comes with sky-high heating costs and prices, the two biggest factors making it difficult to cut costs. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for being here. As we come back on the air, we're taking a look at who's in charge at the Department of Government Efficiency. According to the White House, it's not Elon Musk. In a recent court filing, the Trump administration says Musk is an advisor to President Trump rather than the head of Doge, as Doge gains access to government data. Defining Musk as simply an advisor could help beat back a lawsuit arguing he has too much power. Connecticut Attorney General William Tong says President Trump is fishing for a justification.
It's another example of, they're just making stuff up. They can't seem to shoot straight on this. And if the point that they're making is that Elon Musk doesn't actually have any authority, hasn't been confirmed by the Senate, doesn't have any role, well, that's our argument. That's the point.
Connecticut is one of several states trying to make a case against the White House. Musk insists he is an open book in his new role and is doing everything with transparency while following President Trump's orders. Could Doge checks be coming to taxpayers? That's the latest pitch President Trump and Elon Musk are considering. National correspondent Matt Galka reports.
Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency floated the idea of checks to taxpayers based on Doge's government savings. The president endorsed it this week.
There's even under consideration a new concept where we give 20% of the Doge savings to American citizens and 20% goes to paying down debt, because the numbers are incredible, Elon.
Well, this is all going to be worked on through the reconciliation process with Congress that's going underway right now.
The amount back to taxpayers is contingent on how much Doge truly slashes from government spending. The group has claimed $55 billion saved so far, a number that's already being debated. But the slashes to the federal workforce continue. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has reportedly ordered the military to prepare for major cuts. Hegseth wants 8% cuts to the military's budget each of the next 5 years, a multi-billion-dollar number based on the $850 billion budget in 2025. The IRS is about to start laying off around 6,000 employees, targeting recent hires. The IRS had added more than 20,000 people since 2020. The cuts would bring the workforce close to 2023 levels. The government-wide downsizing is starting to get some pushback from Republicans.
I'm very concerned about the impact on the state of Maine on everything from our national parks to biomedical research. So this is a big problem.
Democrats continue to stew over the agency's work that has mostly gone around Congress to implement changes.
Well, DOGE really stands for the Department of Gutting Everything, from healthcare to education to environmental programs. And it is absolutely something that people are going to have to stand up and fight against.
When asked about the potential for sending out checks, new Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the administration needed to focus on reducing the deficit first. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Galka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
A shipment of U.S.-made 2,000-pound bombs arrived in Israel this week, ending a 9-month embargo put in place by the Biden administration. Speaking to reporters over the weekend, President Trump said he lifted the ban despite a ceasefire agreement being in place. because he believes in peace through strength. The Biden administration sent thousands of the bombs to Israel following the 2023 attack by Hamas militants, but later decided to hold the shipments out of concern for Palestinian citizens. The Missouri man guilty of shooting a teen who mistakenly knocked on his door in Kansas City in 2023 has died while awaiting sentencing. Andrew Lester was 86 years old. He was supposed to be sentenced in early March for the shooting death of Ralph Yarl. Lester faced up to 7 years in prison. Yarl was 16 when he was shot and suffered a traumatic brain injury. Border Patrol agents in Maine are now reporting an uptick of Romanians illegally crossing into the U.S. from Canada. It centers around the town of Holton. Border Patrol says Romanians made up 13% of all illegal crossings this fiscal year, more than doubling since 2023. Only Mexican nationals make up a larger share of encounters in the area. Food contamination may be more widespread and, in many cases, more severe. That's according to a public interest research group report. Most illnesses in 2024 were linked to 13 outbreaks, despite more than 300 food recalls. Researchers say Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli were the most common reasons. 19 people died from an illness related to contaminated food, double compared to 2023. Right now, the Republican-controlled Congress is working to get tax cuts extended. The measure would prevent a $3,000 tax increase a year for each American family. Joining Jan Jeffcoat to discuss is former White House economic advisor Steve Moore.
Good morning. You know, are we dealing with some GOP lawmakers who want to hold these tax cuts hostage to spending cuts, which of course we need those spending cuts too. But as you mentioned, if Reagan had done that, we would have never gotten his historic tax cut that rebuilt the American economy. So what is going on in Washington?
Hey, Jan, great to be with you this morning. Well, listen, I want to make sure that your viewers understand that failure is not an option here. No. And you just cited the statistic that the average family would be delivered a $3,000 tax increase next year. So what we're really talking about is just making the Trump tax cuts permanent, or at least extending them. That would also mean, by the way, if we don't get this done, that virtually every business in America would face a stiff tax increase. There would be other things like the comeback of remember the dreaded alternative minimum tax. So there's an imperative to do this. My frustration has been, why is it taking so long to get this done? This is something that Trump has said he'd like to get done in the first 100 to 150 days. The clock is ticking. Right. And one other quick point, Jan, the longer this takes, the more there's a risk that they might not get it done. And Wall Street is getting very nervous about that. You showed earlier just on the show that we've hit all-time highs on all of the indexes. But, if they don't get this tax cut done, I think you could see a collapse of the market. So there's so much at stake here to get done.
Yeah, it seems like a no-brainer. It seems kind of easy. You did quote the great modern philosopher Spike Lee, do the right thing. Do the right thing. Speaking of which, can we talk about what DOJ has uncovered? Shouldn't we be able to trim the budget with just the sheer amount of fraud and waste that's already been found on the books?
Well, it sure would help, wouldn't it? And what DOJ has discovered in just the last 3 or 4 weeks has been extraordinary. We're spending $10 billion on empty office buildings. We saw $2 billion that the Housing Urban Development Department couldn't even find. They, quote, misplaced. How do you misplace $2 billion, Jan? Right. $20 billion that was shoveled out the door in the last hours of the Biden administration to climate change activist groups. I mean, I could go on with the amount of fraud. A lot of these agencies, they can't even tell us where the money went. The DOJ is now saying that they're trying to audit these agencies, and they can't even say what happened to all that money.
Yeah, it's frightening when you think about the checks and balances and the lack of accountability there.
Yes.
You have a solution to our budget problems that you say will unlock America's $12 trillion treasure chest. Is that is that right? Trillion?
That's right.
With a T?
Yep.
What is this?
So everyone knows we have massive amounts of energy in this country, and we are going to be doing drill, baby, drill. But another part of our economy that really needs to be rejuvenated is we have more mines and precious minerals of any country in the world, in the states like in the mountains of Montana and Colorado and the Dakotas and Utah. We've basically had a moratorium on mining in this country for the last 20 years, and we should revive that that industry. You know, it's just so interesting because we get a lot of the minerals now from countries like China and Russia and other countries that are not exactly friendly to the United States. So why not become self-sufficient in these minerals? We could, as I said, there's about $12 trillion. Just the royalties from allowing that drilling could raise $1 or $2 trillion that we could use to lower our debt. So it's a no-brainer, and I believe that Trump is very committed to doing this.
What states are we looking at when we're talking about this?
Sorry?
What states are we talking about? And should I be digging in my backyard right now?
Yeah, right. Well, if you live in the mountain states, that's where those minerals are. I mentioned Colorado, Montana, Utah, the Dakotas. California has a lot of minerals. Now, obviously, we want to do it in an environmentally sensitive way, but there's a way to do this to ensure we, protect our environment, but also get the minerals we need. For example, just to give you one example, there's a big revival of nuclear power. Well, you need uranium to power nuclear plants. We have uranium. Let's get it and use it for our nuclear plants.
Former White House Economic Advisor Steve Moore, great to see you as always, sir. Have a great week.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
More than 40% of homes sold in the U.S. in 2024 were tied to HOA fees, but this wasn't always the case. Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team joining us. I know you researched the history of these fees, which goes way back. What did you find?
Yeah, so HOAs, they really have been around since the early 20th century, but they didn't quite take off until after World War II. So from 1964 to 2005, the number of privately governed housing developments in the U.S. rose from 500 to 274,000. That's all according to research from the redress movement. The suburban boom led developers to create these associations to manage shared spaces and enforce community rules. HOAs really became more common as local governments started just passing on their responsibility of infrastructure maintenance, like roads, parks, that sort of thing, to private communities, and that's all according to fine law.
For some, they're not an issue, but for others I've talked to, it can be a deal breaker. What are the options?
So from what I found, if you want to skip HOA fees, really your best bet is to just buy a home in a neighborhood that doesn't have them. Think older areas or more rural spots where they're not as common. But some communities have voluntary HOAs as opposed to mandatory ones. So with voluntary, you can choose to join and avoid the fees. But if you already own a home in an HOA mandatory area, getting out's really tricky. Your only real option is just selling and moving somewhere without them. And that's all according to a report from HomeLight.
All right, good information, helpful. Emma, thank you. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. As many of us know firsthand, unfortunately, heating the home can get expensive, and geography may play a factor in those costs. A new study by Home Gnome ranks the most expensive U.S. cities to heat a home during the winter. Cities in the Midwest take up the top 10 spots. Cleveland, Ohio was ranked the most expensive, with Dayton, Ohio and Independence, Missouri following close behind. Experts say extreme winter weather and poor residential energy codes can make it difficult for those in the Midwest to keep their energy costs down. So to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from Trump's border crackdown to a shift in U.S.-Israel relations.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. President Trump and Elon Musk continuing their sweeping overhaul of the federal government. National correspondent Matt Galko, what's the latest with their DOGE effort?
Well, Steve, a lot's been going on with DOGE since Donald Trump took office, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with. So this past week, I'll try to break it down into three things. The first thing, layoffs. They continue across most of government, and that includes places like FEMA. The IRS is about to lay off 6,000, mostly probationary workers, and there's other agencies that are performing mass layoffs too. The Pentagon is also, the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is telling the military to prepare for cuts over the next 5 years. He wants to see an 8% reduction in the budget for the next 5 years. That's a multi-billion-dollar ask. The next part is pushback, and there's obviously been Democrat pushback to a lot of this, but there's starting to be some Republican pushback, namely Maine Senator Susan Collins. She said she believes that DOGE is working too fast. And a group of New York Republicans from the House actually sent a letter after some cuts were made to a 9/11 first responders fund from some layoffs that were taking place the past week. So there is some growing pushback even in Republican circles. And the last thing I'll go with is, I guess, blind hope, because now there is even the possibility that taxpayers will be getting checks sent directly to them thanks to DOGE's work. Now, how much that would be would depend on cost savings, and whether or not that even happens, that would ultimately end up going through Congress. But Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said this past week that they would be working with Congress to try and make that happen. So a lot to keep up with, and I'm sure a lot more is going to be happening in the near future too.
Yeah, DOGE continues to be front and center. Meanwhile, illegal immigration continues to be a top focus for President Trump. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, you spoke to Trump's border czar this past week about his efforts so far.
You said you are satisfied with the numbers now?
I'm happy with the number. I'm not satisfied. I won't be satisfied till every criminal gang member is eradicated from this country. Every illegal alien with a criminal conviction is eradicated in this country.
Christine, give us a little context about the latest numbers you were referring to.
Yeah, so there's two sets of numbers that the White House has really been focused on. That's the number of people showing up to the southern border, which has seen a dramatic increase. In fact, CBP posted the numbers from January 21st, which is the day after Trump took office, to January 31st. There was an 85% decline from the same period last year. Another interesting factoid that Homan pointed out, one day last weekend, there were only 229 border apprehensions across the entire southwest border. Compare that to nearly 11,000 on the highest days under President Biden. One other set of number is ICE arrests inside of the country. Those have gone up 137%.
Right, numbers we'll continue to watch closely as this continues on. And national correspondent Kayla Gaskins, you sat down with Israel's new ambassador to the U.S. this past week, who talked about his country's relationship with the new administration.
We're feeling that any daylight that had been created between us and the last administration is being erased. We're moving into a mode of learning to tango together right now. Not yet lockstep, but very close tango.
Kayla, you talked to the ambassador more about that tango and what it means for the future of Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, Steve, what a time to be the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. A lot on Michael Leiter's to-do list. He's only been on the job for about a month now. And top of that is solidifying this U.S.-Israel relationship, a relationship that they feel like maybe had a little bit of distance, according to the new ambassador in the last administration. And like you just said there, I think they are closing the gap, and they're learning how to tango together. So he has met briefly with President Trump, but the two have not had a one-on-one sit down yet. The ambassador has spent a lot of time on the Hill, though, forging some bipartisan relationships, meeting with Republicans and meeting with Democrats. He said the bipartisan nature of getting everybody on the same page about Israel, and he does believe Israel can be a bipartisan issue, especially when it comes to dealing with Iran, and they will need to get the U.S. Congress on board with that. Now, where Leiter says that the Israel agrees with the U.S. is with the proposal right now that Trump has laid out for the future of Gaza. He says he supports Trump's plan for the U.S. to go in and take control of Gaza. But Steve, that is getting complicated because also this week there were some meetings in the Middle East with some of Israel's neighbors, Egypt and Jordan in Saudi Arabia, to discuss what they would like to do about Gaza. But either way, the ambassador says he does believe that all of the regional powers that surround Israel, that would include Egypt, that would include Jordan, that would include Saudi Arabia, he says he does believe that they will be able to use diplomacy to come to an agreement what to do about Gaza that everyone feels good about. Please.
Kayla, Christine, Matt, as always, excellent reporting. Thank you all for your hard work. Back to you.
Up next here, after several major snowstorms sweeping the country, some areas are seeing a shortage of salt, the substitutions you can use instead. And later, tech threat. Law enforcement discovers the dark side of artificial intelligence, plus what you can do to keep your loved ones safe. The This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you, from calls for changes when it comes to utility access in Virginia to an ongoing rock salt shortage in New York. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Florida with law enforcement discovering the dark side of artificial intelligence.
In a world where technology is constantly evolving, and in just one click, artificial intelligence can produce just about anything, officials are discovering the dark side of AI.
This is a complex issue that we're now dealing with. We never dreamed that we would be using AI or seeing AI used in this capacity.
Earlier this week, Martin County Sheriff's officials arrested 29-year-old Leonel Alvarado Lozano for possessing and creating multiple images of AI-generated child pornography.
His perversion is real. His thought process is real. And that individual, given the opportunity, will absolutely offend and commit an act on a child if they have the opportunity.
Child advocate Callahan Wall says data shows these types of crimes are on the rise.
While this is an emerging technology, in 2023 we saw over 5,000 reports to our cyber tip line that used AI to create child sexual abuse material. Now that was in 2023. We're still going over our 2024 numbers.
He's encouraging parents to get ahead of the game by talking to their children about online safety.
There's a monster in your mailbox every month, and it's an ATCO bill.
From rising electric bills to thousands of customers left in the dark for days at a time following storms, Republican state senators Bill Stanley, Travis Hackworth, and Todd Pillion say enough is enough when it comes to Appalachian Power.
They don't care, in my opinion, and I think it shows. We only see them caring when they send you the bill.
They say you should have a choice in who provides your power.
What is our choices? What can we do? How do we break this?
So they sent a letter to the State Corporation Commission. The SCC has regulatory authority over utilities, including Appalachian.
And we're going to make sure not only do we get answers, but we're going to get something done about this.
It's no secret that rock salt is a hot commodity lately.
I had checked at Home Depot, Tractor Supply, Honeoye Falls, Ace Hardware, and they're all out.
Here in Honeoye Falls, the story is no different.
This is a main thoroughfare, so I try very hard to keep it safe for the people who are walking their pets and going to the restaurants here in downtown.
Todd Clue works at the restaurant next door. He says he and his team are even resorting to using table salt between shovelings.
With our deliveries and our stairs, we use kosher salt. I mean, in a pinch, just because you can't have people going up and down stairs with kegs and stuff with no salt. So.
With high demand and salt in short supply, municipalities often have the first priority to keep the roads clean.
So it really is just a matter of timing, and you got to be a little bit strategic with what you're doing.
Coming up next, Apple wants you on Team iPhone, the new release touting the company's new AI that's challenging the market. The NFL is going back to Brazil. This week, the league announced the Los Angeles Chargers will open their 2025 regular season in Sao Paulo on September 5th. It'll be the Chargers' first international game since 2019. The NFL's first game in Brazil, which featured the Green Bay Packers and Philadelphia Eagles last season, was overshadowed by poor field conditions. Additional international games this upcoming season will be played in London, Dublin, Madrid, and Berlin. Apple has now launched a cheaper new version of the iPhone 16. The iPhone 16e sells for $599. It's now the cheapest iPhone that supports the new AI tool, Apple Intelligence. Apple faces increased competition from Google and Samsung in the smartphone market. Both companies are updating Android devices with new AI features. The iPhone 16e is set to launch next Friday. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.